In the last 130 plus years of movie production, there are very few characters who are more legendary than the famous Anakin Skywalker, or, as he has been known by most of the Star Wars galaxy, Darth Vader. Over the past 40 plus years, with all of the new content that we've seen added to the Star Wars canon, we basically followed Darth Vader from the time he was a child right up until his final moments. As someone who loves Star Wars and basically grew up with the prequel trilogy, and as someone who makes YouTube videos, I feel like I would absolutely love to have the opportunity to make this video as a passion project. Now, granted, making a Star Wars video essay, much less one about Anakin Skywalker, is basically like peeing into the ocean, but I don't particularly care. I love Star Wars, I love making videos, and I would love to be able to share my passion with the rest of you. So join me on this amateur video where I break down the entire character arc of Anakin Skywalker. But before we go into Anakin's character, we have to start from the beginning of his character story, and it doesn't actually start in Phantom Menace. It begins far, far earlier, all the way back to the time of Darth Plagueis the Wise. Ever since the advent of Darth Bane's rule of two, the Sith had fallen into obscurity. With each passing century, they waited for the moment where the Force would tip in their favor, and at the apex of their grand design, Darth Plagueis and his apprentice, Darth Sidious, prepared to set their long-awaited plans into motion to unfurl 1,000 years of Sith vengeance upon the galaxy. At this point in Star Wars canon, they had already begun the commission of the Great Clone Army with the help of Jedi Master Sifo Dyas and the Kaminoans. Sidious himself personally orchestrated the crisis on Naboo and used the Trade Federation as a front to destabilize the Republic. But the key catalyst to their rise was when they began a prolonged meditation. They had done something no Sith had ever done before. They tipped the balance of the Force itself in their favor.
They had succeeded in willing the Force to shift and tip irrevocably to the dark side. Not a mere paradigm shift, but a tangible alteration that could be felt by anyone strong in the Force. The shift had been the outcome of months of intense meditation, during which Plagueis and Sidious had sought to challenge the Force for sovereignty and suffuse the galaxy with the power of the dark side. They had brought the power of their will to bear, asserting their sovereignty over the Force. No counterforce had risen against them. In what amounted to a state of rapture, they knew that the Force had yielded, as if some deity had been tipped from its throne. The light side had dipped, and the dark side had ascended.
For many years, Darth Plagueis had aspirations of using the Force to gain power over life and death by experimenting with the midichlorians. To Plagueis, the Force is not something that should be obeyed and approached with reverence. Rather, it is something to be conquered, to be controlled, to be used to satisfy one's ends.
To say that the Force works in mysterious ways is to admit one's ignorance, for any mystery can be solved through the application of knowledge and unrelenting effort. As we had our way with the Senate, and as we will soon have our way with the Republic and the Jedi, we will have our way with the Force.
Darth Plagueis' experimentation with the midichlorians led to something remarkable and unprecedented in the history of the galaxy, a vergence in the Force that culminated and manifested itself in the conception of a child, the Chosen One. We all know the name of this boy as Anakin Skywalker.
He could use the Force to influence the midichlorians to create life. The dark side of the Force is a pathway to many abilities some consider to be unnatural.
And so, we meet Anakin Skywalker. Anakin was born to his mother, Shmi, on the planet of Tatooine, owned by Gardulla the Hutt, before he was sold to Watto, a Toydarian junk dealer. Anakin's early years on this planet was a life marked by slavery, hardship, and poverty.
All slaves have a transmitter placed inside their body somewhere.
Any attempt to escape,
and they blow you up. Boom!
And so, the sandy deserts of Tatooine always reminded Anakin of his life as a slave and all the suffering and hardship he went through. Sand isn't just some annoyance, it's a visceral reminder of Anakin's pain-ridden past and trauma as a slave. He longs for a life of significance, of conscience. But more importantly, he wanted power. He wanted power, the power to shape and change his own destiny, to make his own course in life. And that's precisely why when he sees Qui-Gon for the first time, the first thing he notices is his lightsaber. To Anakin, becoming a Jedi was an opportunity for him to wield power he never had before. We also, of course, see Anakin's fantastic skills as a pod racer, which in some respects is the only thing he can turn to for recourse in his life as a slave. That, and of course, building droids like C-3PO. Later, when Anakin is freed, in addition to his pursuit of power to shape his destiny, we also see another important aspect of his character, and that's love, or perhaps more specifically, the fear of the loss of love. At this point in Anakin's life, his mother was the only person who actually loved him. And so, becoming a Jedi was Anakin's one and only chance to escape a life of slavery, but it came with the cost of losing the only family he ever had, the only family he ever loved, and he put it all behind to join an order where he was told he wasn't allowed to love. VOP in this Reddit thread pointed out something that I absolutely love about Shmi's character. When it comes down to it, Shmi does what Anakin himself would fail to do years later. She lets go of her attachment. She'll always love Anakin, but she also realizes that he's better off being far away from her in her predicament. When you really think about it, she is a tragic character on so many levels. She was stolen from her old life and forced into slavery, and then she had to give up the one thing that gave her joy. And then they put this 9-year-old boy in a room full of complete strangers, basically dissecting his deepest and darkest insecurities, ranging from his mother to his fears, with no empathy or regard for him. In The Phantom Menace, Qui-Gon is the only Jedi who has any faith in Anakin, not the person who would go on to be Anakin's master, who calls Anakin
another pathetic life form.
Not Master Windu, who is probably the most disrespectful person in the entire room, and not even Master Yoda, the wisest person of the entire Jedi Order, who had no idea what to do with him. Both Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan knew that Obi-Wan was not ready for this task of becoming Anakin's master, and yet, the role was thrust upon Obi-Wan.
Clouded this boy's future is.
Remember, the Jedi Order takes Jedi when they're too young to remember their parents, so they wouldn't have attachments to their old families, which is why they didn't want to train Anakin, who was already attached to his mother.
No, he will not be trained.
No.
And say what you will about Jake Lloyd's acting, but that look right there explains everything. It's a look of vindictive hurt and tension, and you can see the inner turmoil in Anakin as he tries to understand why the Jedi won't train him. And then, about 30 seconds later, Anakin sees where the priorities of the Jedi Order actually are.
Now is not the time for this. The Senate is voting for a new Supreme Chancellor, and Queen Amidala is returning home.
Politics. Master Windu, no offense to Samuel L. Jackson, who's fantastic, is basically an archetype of everything wrong with the Jedi Order at this point. He brushes aside Anakin Skywalker, who Qui-Gon points out is the chosen one, and explains the more important matter is the election of a new Supreme Chancellor. And that moment, right there, that Anakin gives to Mace Windu, explains everything. The Jedi, guardians of peace and justice, prioritize political maneuvering rather than fulfilling their responsibilities of training the new era of Jedi. This is only the beginning of what would go on to be a major cataclysmic rift between Anakin Skywalker and the Jedi Order. The final wisdom that Master Qui-Gon imparts to Anakin is this.
Always remember, your focus determines your reality.
In other words, Anakin, you are the master of your own destiny. Your fate is what you make of it. The Jedi are taught to always be mindful of their thoughts and emotions and actions because of the deep connection they have with the Force. And so Anakin, whose life is rife with uncertainty, fear, anxiety, and confusion, those become his reality. And unfortunately, they would go on to lead Anakin down a very dark path. And like Qui-Gon, he disobeys the Jedi, but only because he wants to do the right thing for the right reason, and he trusts his instincts. Now, this is important. Anakin is responsible for winning the Battle of Naboo by destroying the mothership, but he only gets recognition from one person, Palpatine. Now, to digress momentarily, in the Darth Plagueis novelization, we actually learn how Darth Sidious and Darth Plagueis found out about Anakin Skywalker's existence. Palpatine learns about Anakin first, and he learns about this from Master Dooku, who actually was a member of the Jedi Order at the time. Dooku seemed relatively dismissive of the prophecy, but the moment that Palpatine learned about this 9-year-old boy he can see by the Force, immediately Palpatine's thoughts were wound to the landing platform where he and Chancellor Valorum welcomed Amidala, or rather a lookalike of Amidala, and saw a sandy-haired boy swathed in filthy clothing who spent the night in his apartment suite. But what's shocking is that Palpatine didn't sense anything about this boy. And then from there, Palpatine tells Plagueis. Now, many don't know this, but there's actually one scene in the novel where Plagueis actually sees Anakin in person. Plagueis uses the Force to try and learn more about Anakin Skywalker, but his reaction to what he finds out is shocking.
There was still a chance that the Council would decide that Anakin was too old to be trained as a Jedi. That way, assuming he was returned to Tatooine. But if not, if Qui-Gon managed to sway the Council Masters, and they reneged on their own dictates, are we undone? Have you undone us?
Lifting his face from the macro binoculars, he stretched out with the Force and fell victim to an assault of perplexing images. Ferocious battles in deep space, the clashing of lightsabers, partitions of radiant light, a black-helmeted cyborg rising from a table. By the time his gaze had returned to the platform, Qui-Gon and the boy had disappeared. Trying desperately to make some sense of the images granted him by the Force, he stood motionless, watching the starship lift from the platform and climb into the night. He fought to repress the truth. The boy would change the course of history. The fact that Qui-Gon Jinn had identified Maul as a Sith was to be expected, but Dooku's news about a human boy at the center of a vergence in the Force had come as a shock. More, Qui-Gon saw the boy as the Jedi's chosen one. Maul had to kill Qui-Gon to keep the boy from being trained. Qui-Gon was the key to everything.
The arrival of Anakin Skywalker threatened to undo all of the long-laid plans of the Sith. One boy, a 9-year-old slave from the backwater planet of Tatooine, could threaten to destroy the Sith and lay waste to 1,000 years of planning and preparation. If Qui-Gon was to train Anakin, Anakin would grow up to become everything he would be destined to be. The Chosen One. The prophecy that Plagueis and Sidious had both dismissed as a fairy tale. He would bring on their complete and utter destruction. This had effectively made Qui-Gon enemy number 1 for the Sith. Qui-Gon had to be dispatched immediately. The first time Maul encountered Qui-Gon on Tatooine, he was sent there to capture Padme Amidala. But the second time, on Naboo, there was no mistake. He was there to kill Qui-Gon Jinn. And so, the Duel of Fates was the pivotal struggle between the Jedi and the Sith, where the outcome of this duel would bring about ramifications that would spiral throughout the galaxy. The outcome of this duel was central to Anakin's character arc as a Chosen One. This Duel of Fates was a duel for the fate of Anakin Skywalker. Where Plagueis saw Anakin and fell into panic, Sidious saw Anakin and saw an opportunity. Sidious looked at Anakin Skywalker, the Chosen One, and saw an opportunity, despite the Force once more, to bend the will of the Chosen One to his own. Palpatine would, in effect, co-opt the very instrument of his own destruction. After all,
Always two there are. No more, no less. A master and an apprentice.
But which was destroyed? The master or the apprentice?
from the moment that Palpatine sensed Anakin's connection with the Force, he had been dead set on setting his teeth into Anakin and making him his apprentice. Palpatine was relentless, but he was also patient. He bided his time and fostered a relationship with Anakin over the course of several years. My favorite instance of this is when Palpatine takes a young Anakin to a bar in the lower levels of Coruscant, and when they sat down, Palpatine got to work. I must say, in some ways I envy you Padawans training in the temple as you do. Your entire life, decided forever at such a young age, you must simplify things. You have no troubling choices to make. Not like me. My entire life is difficult decisions. Anakin, however, would be the last person to claim this entire life was planned out. With a regurgitated, half-hearted response that perhaps even Anakin knew was a lie, he says, "Yes, it's the best thing that's ever happened to me." Palpatine then shows Anakin the bar that they're at. Knowing Anakin's past as a slave, he says, "Lives are bought and sold in this club every single day. It's revolting." Oh, I'm sorry, I should have never mentioned that. That is to say, I know where you come from, Anakin, and I hope I did not raise old wounds by mentioning slavery. Anakin responds, "I don't even think of it that much anymore." Palpatine sees right through it. "Now, you and I both know that's not true." Anakin, still young and impressionable, and perhaps even still naive because he had spent so much time cooped up in the temple, says, "I don't understand. If this place is so awful, why doesn't the Senate do something about it?" Palpatine then explains that the Senate approves of this behavior because the club is full of senators. When they laugh at a senator who lost a large amount of money because Anakin used the Force to make the dice fall on an unfavorable roll, they are promptly made to leave the establishment, although Anakin was quick to reach for his lightsaber. When asked about his ability with the Force, Anakin points out, "I'm very good at it. Better than most of the other Padawans at my age, and most of the older ones too." When Anakin asks if Palpatine can now take down this corrupt senator, Palpatine points out that the senator, Senator Calandris, is simply, quote, "one viper among many." In his current position, there is little he can do, and even the Jedi can't do much about it. Anakin asks, "Then, if you can't, and the Jedi can't, who can?" From Anakin's perspective, this is the job of the Jedi, and now he's being told that they're basically powerless. Palpatine then asks Anakin if he's happy at the Jedi Temple. Anakin, of course, answers that he is, but both of them know that isn't the case. It's there that Palpatine makes his pitch. "I want you to know that there is always a place for you with me. Once your training is complete, of course. I could make extraordinary use of a young man like yourself." About 10 years later, we get to Attack of the Clones, and Anakin, now 19 years old, is still a Padawan, but he's an incredibly accomplished Padawan with very renowned skills. After orchestrating the assassination attempt on Padme, Palpatine proposed that she is protected by Obi-Wan, or rather, Anakin Skywalker. And after 10 years, Anakin, of course, having Elriz, has no idea how to talk to Padme, and he's super socially awkward, but then he shoots from the hip, and perhaps getting overzealous, promises to find who will try to kill her. Obi-Wan, always one to follow the will of the Council, gets into dispute with Anakin, and Obi-Wan does a terrible job here reprimanding Anakin publicly. As a master, humiliating your apprentice like this in public will only further alienate him from you, and then you dismiss him by taking jabs at his abilities, and then you wonder why Anakin is so angsty all the time. Obi-Wan is in the position of master, which he is not prepared for, and Anakin is stuck with the master, who is still a Padawan when he was told he had to train the Chosen One. Neither of them wanted this role. Imagine what it's like to be told in one breath that you're the Chosen One, to bring balance to the Force, and then in the next breath you're constantly undermined, held back, put in your place, and never given any real trust. But there is one person in Anakin's life who always recognizes him for his abilities. Palpatine.
You don't need guidance, Anakin. In time, you will learn to trust your feelings. Then you will be invincible. I have said it many times. You are the most gifted Jedi I have ever met.
Thank you, Your Excellency.
I see you becoming the greatest of all Jedi, Anakin. Even more powerful than Master Yoda.
Now, as I already hinted at, a major component to the second prequel movie is about Anakin wrestling with his love for Padme and following the Jedi Code. And that's a source of major strife and conflict for Anakin, where Anakin is bound to the principles of the Jedi Order and constantly told to practice emotional detachment, but his feelings for Padme consumes him. Despite his best efforts to try and suppress his emotions, Anakin's feelings only deepen, and that only causes him further distress. He loves her, but he's haunted by the fear of what that love could mean. And Chancellor Palpatine, ever the puppet master, would use Anakin's love and exploit it as his greatest weakness. He would use Anakin's love as a weapon. Anakin at this time period of his life also experiences a profound sense of dread. He's haunted by the recurring dreams as he feels the coming tragedy of his mother, but he's left powerless to stop it. As a Jedi, not only is he called to be detached, but he's unable to do anything to help her. His inability to help his mother weighed heavily on his conscience, and at last, in an act of defiance, he goes to Tatooine to rescue his mother, only to find her captured and tortured by Tusken Raiders. He was too late. In the end, he couldn't save her. She never even got the chance to say, "I love you," before she died.
I love.
Young Skywalker is in pain. Terrible pain.
In a primal fit of unbridled rage, Anakin, with neither remorse nor pity, exacted his vengeance upon those who killed his mother. The dark side fuels his vengeance and power as he slaughters them, not just the men, but the women and the children too. The power, the rage, it's intoxicating. He reveled in it. Even the spirit of Qui-Gon Jinn crying out to him through the Force could not stop him. The fear of his mother's impending death led to anger. Anger against the Jedi. Anger against his master. Anger against himself. And that anger led to hate against those who took the only person who truly cared for him. But that hate only left him with suffering. Killing 1,000 Tusken Raiders did not bring his mother back. In the end, he wasn't strong enough to save her. But as he sat before his mother's grave in the presence of Padme, he vowed that he would never fail again. He would not make the same mistake twice. One thing to notice is the stark contrast between Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan against Maul and Anakin and Obi-Wan against Dooku. Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan fought together seamlessly against Maul, teaming up and coordinating their attacks perfectly. They were truly the ideal archetype of the relationship between a master and apprentice, always on the same page. And that's why Maul always tried to separate them, always tried to fight them one-on-one. One, because his goal was to kill Qui-Gon, but two, because he could not beat them both if they worked together. But we see the exact opposite in Attack of the Clones. Anakin, overzealous as always, doesn't heed the advice of his master and charges in, and he pays the price for it, leaving Obi-Wan to fight Dooku by himself. Obi-Wan's Atari was little more than a cheap, less efficient version of the style that Qui-Gon used, and it was a style that Dooku was all too familiar with. Dooku easily dispatched Obi-Wan, but despite Anakin initially being incapacitated by Force lightning, to Dooku's surprise, he saw a first-hand taste of the renowned skills of the Chosen One. In a desperate effort, Obi-Wan threw Anakin a second lightsaber. Anakin seamlessly switched from Form 5 to Jar Kai as he caught the blade in stride, but Dooku's experience and mastery of Form 2 was too much for Anakin. Despite losing one of the lightsabers, Anakin continued to fight, and as they fought in the darkness, you can see Anakin showing flashes of red and blue, showing that even now he's still torn, right at the threshold between light and dark, while Dooku, being a Sith, remained red. Anakin fought hard, but in the end, Dooku still defeated him. In the end, it was only Yoda, the true master of Ataru, that forced Dooku to retreat. At the end of the movie, we hear the Imperial March playing as the Clone Army begins to assemble, and, just like at the end of the first film, Darth Sidious was always in control.
Not a day goes by that I don't look to his wisdom for guidance. I've done my best to pass his teaching to you, and in our time together, you have proven to me that you are capable of all he believed you would be.
In the Clone Wars, Anakin Skywalker emerges as this legendary figure. He's a war hero celebrated for his daring in battle and his skills in lightsaber combat, and he cements himself without question as the greatest pilot in the galaxy. By the time Anakin was an adult, he had accomplished more in a few years than what most Jedi could hope to accomplish in their entire lifetimes. He was at the zenith of his power, the strongest he had ever been. Anakin now stands at the precipice of his destiny, but his greatest challenges still lie ahead, and as the shadows of Anakin's past continue to haunt him, Anakin's story is far from over, and the actions he takes in the coming years will change the fate of the galaxy forever.